Welcome to Soul Night. One more time. Welcome to Soul Night Live, number 7. My guest this week is Tom Brislin from Kansas. And without further ado, we're going to bring in
Tom. On.
This is my co-host, Stephen Cox.
How's it going?
He'll be fielding your questions online. So if you have any questions from Tom, go ahead and send them in.
And we've already got a few.
Okay. Hi, Tom.
Hi, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing fine.
Thank you so much for being part of our show tonight. Really
My pleasure.
Dropping by. Got a lot of questions, and I'm really excited to talk with you about the different phases of your career, and of course, a lot about Kansas, because that's been a pretty exciting year for you.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just a little over a year now, right, that you've been with the group?
Yeah, my first gig with the band was on Valentine's Day or thereabouts last year.
Yeah, it was on the Prague cruise, right?
No, it was actually on the Rock Legends cruise.
Oh, okay.
I jumped from the cruise to the edge with the sea within and then jumped to the other boat almost immediately, back to back.
Okay, well, that's awesome. So, yeah, it's been about a year now. Any particular shows stand out that you've done in the past year that really seem ultra amazing, special?
Well, the first one was definitely pretty charged in a lot of ways, being the first show for me, but also the fact that we were up on this pool deck in the middle of the afternoon. Sun was in our face. We had no sound check. And some of the guys had the mixes of the other band members in their earphones. So it was a little bit of a perfect storm of heads up and just get down to business and play. And I thought it was actually a pretty fun way to get started. It was like not in the comfort zone at all, but you just had to sort of bear down and get with it. And we ended up having a good laugh about it. And the reaction was really cool. So
I saw some footage of that, and it was good. But I played some shows where the sun just beating down on you, and even that alone kind of takes you out of your comfort zone a bit. So I can imagine, just getting on with it. But what a setting!
Yeah, really. And what's more, when I look at the very end of last year, we finished up the tour at the Beacon Theater in New York City, and we did a one-of-a-kind show where we played all of Left Overture and Point of No Return. And special for me, being from the New York tri-state area, Jersey boy, a lot of my friends and relatives were in the audience. And again, for me, that was the one and only time so far that I played some of the songs like Magnum Opus and Opus Insert. So heads up. And,
yeah, that's
and there
awesome.
you have it.
That's awesome. I caught you guys in little old Topeka, Kansas for Wheat Fest. And it was really cool to see you play the Point of No Return and so many other sets or songs in the set. The opening set was great, the acoustic one. Your piano solo on South Wind really was like a throwing down the gauntlet, like, here I am. This is what it's all about. It
was a fun way to start the show.
Yeah, well, And I thought it was so great. I followed your career for many years, and it kind of reminded me of like when Deep Purple got Steve Morse. I thought, well, here's one of my favorite musicians landing a really great gig. And, 25 years later, he's still at it. So,
yeah.
Kudos to you. I've had the pleasure of seeing you with Yes and Renaissance and Camel, I think. To see you in this position, I thought you were the perfect choice.
Oh, thank you very much.
And I really love your attention to detail when it comes to the sounds that were on those original records. I think that's something that kind of slipped a bit in the 90s a little bit. I think Steve Walsh maybe wasn't too concerned about that, and that's fine. That's his prerogative. But, starting with your predecessor, Mannion, David Mannion, it was great to see a Hammond on stage. Now, of course, you don't need a real Hammond to get a fantastic Hammond sound. So I imagine when it was time for you to do your thing, you were able to bring your entire rig and kind of start fresh. Is that right?
I constructed my Kansas stage rig from the ground up based on a few things that I had been working on with another project of my own called Gold Rotation. I started developing a new stage setup, and I wanted to get that real Hammond sound, but I wanted some of the modern bells and whistles as well. So we do have a Leslie speaker sitting right off stage, spinning away, cranking out the organ when I play it. But yeah, it's interesting when you look at a lot of, for lack of a better term, legacy bands that go from the 70s to the 80s and 90s, particularly keyboardists, there are trade-offs. Whereas some of the sound, I mean, I love the 70s sound. Come on, all the analog goopiness and grease and lushness, it's awesome. But I'm sure they gave the road crews a lot of headaches.
Oh yeah.
And so when you have the 80s and 90s with the more streamlined gear that might be more reliable in some ways, but it doesn't have that, it's a trade-off. And when I first got picked to play on the Yes Symphonic tour, one of the first things I did was I went on eBay and I bought an old Mini Moog from 1974. I was like, I'm the Yes keyboardist, buy it now, let's go right now. And then they were like, no, we don't want you to bring that. I was like, are you kidding me? It's a Mini Moog. And I think they just remembered all the tuning hassles and all the other issues that came with this awesome but very cutting edge gear at the time. So they wanted me to go more modern, but I found a synth that's back in 2001. So I used a synthesizer called the Alesis Andromeda, which had that analog heart in it, but it had some of it was a current keyboard at the time. So I said, oh no, I got the new stuff. See, here it is right there. But little did they know that the beating heart of the synthesizer was old school. And that's what I ended up using on Symphonic Tour. And I try to use that on almost every album I've recorded since in whatever band. And it does appear on the new Kansas album.
Oh, awesome. Well, you really nailed the sounds. And I remember you even did the solo to Owner of Lonely Heart. How did that come about? Was Steve just like, I don't want to play that, you do it?
Funny story. That was actually my idea in a strange sort of spur of the moment thing, because I think most Yes fans know that Steve Howe would prefer to play Steve Howe Yes music.
Sure.
But here we were playing in parts of Europe that the band had never played before. And so the audiences, the promoters, the DVD producers, they were like, well, you are going to play your number one song, right? And we didn't do Owner of Lonely Heart on the Symphonic Tour in North America. It wasn't part of it, but there was quite the demand for it once we got to Europe. And Steve wasn't into it, but Chris Squire actually suggested that I talk to him about this, because he saw that we got along really well. And I was like, okay, you're just sending this pawn in to get knocked off the chessboard immediately, right? But I had a little meeting with Steve, and he said, I just don't think people would really care for the way I would play that song. And I said, well, what if I played Trevor's harmonized guitar solo on the synth? And I don't even know where that idea came from. It was sort of a quick on my feet sort of thing. And he thought about it for a few seconds, said, okay, we'll do it. You take that solo. And so I marched out of the room triumphant to Chris and John, and they looked at me like, how'd you pull that off? And, so we ended up doing it.
It's just a matter of asking, I guess. Well, that's awesome. I always thought that Steve was better soloing over the end of it rather than playing the solo. It's like he'll just kind of.
And that's what they ended up doing, yeah. I think, from the late 90s to present day.
Yeah. So while we're on Yes a bit, how did you land that gig? How did that come about?
I was Meatloaf's keyboardist at the time, and Meatloaf and Yes had the same management.
Okay.
And originally, there was some talk about me filling in for Igor because I think they wanted to go back to Russia, and he couldn't go back. So I said, hey, I was raised on this stuff. I could pull it off if you need somebody to fill in for a few shows. I don't know, this bold 25-year-old. I was thinking, but they said, all right, start making a tape. start making a video of you playing some Yes music. And I was, after the Meatloaf tour, I was working on it. And I also started recording a Meatloaf studio album, which ended up being Couldn't Have Said It Better. And during that period of time, early 2001, they came to me and said, change of plans. Yes is going out with an orchestra. And Rick will be back next year. But would you like to play as part of the orchestra? And I was like, yeah, of course. I'll play with the orchestra. That sounds like a blast. Because I think originally they thought that they could have the orchestra replace all of the keyboard parts.
Yeah.
Which that was the intention. And then, but by the end of my first phone call with John Anderson, where he was asking me if I could handle it, he said, I want 100% of every keyboard part of Yes Music played by you. And I hear you sing too, so we want you doing harmonies also. So I was like, okay, that escalated quickly. And then I just got into it.
How much of that material did you know? I figure probably as a teenager, you probably messed with a lot of that, maybe even covered some in some local bands. So how much homework did you have to do, and how easy did it come together?
I did have to do my fair share of homework, but like you suggested, I was quite familiar with Yes Music, and I started attempting to play Yes Music when I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, like trying South Side of the Sky on piano and things like that. Had a band in high school where we were playing a lot of prog rock, Yes, Rush, ELP, Saga even. And it was already not in fashion in the early 90s, but we just loved it. And, we played Roundabout and Battle of the Bands and that whole thing. And it's funny because I was way into prog as a teenager, also this time when I was getting into jazz and also into classical music. And I was just seriously into all things keyboard, electronic music, techno, anything really. But once I got into college and I was studying jazz, I actually thought that I had no idea that I would actually be playing progressive rock in my career professionally down the road, because I always thought it was sort of like a passion thing. And, everybody in the 90s was saying that, prog is done and there's no market for that anymore or whatever. And I'm dreaming of mini moogs and mellotrons and all that stuff. But I got into so many other kinds of music that I started writing anything really. I was listening to Stevie Wonder and Magma interchangeably. So it's like, make
That's
that what
a
you
good
will.
combo.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So you did the tour with Yes for about a year. Was there ever any talk of having you on Magnification, or was it that?
It was like probably about 85% done by the time they called me to do the tour. I did stop by the house that they were recording at while they were finishing it up. But that was more of a just get to know the band kind of hang. But they were really focused on having the orchestra on the album, and to some degree Alan White on piano. Yeah. So that wasn't really in the cards ever, I don't think.
That's a really nice album. I think it was a fitting farewell for John Anderson. And some of those pieces really harken back to the 70s. I always thought the end of In the Presence Of kind of reminded me of the way Starship Trooper winds out at the end, And, there's just some really nice stuff on there. So if y'all have never heard that album, I highly suggest it. And I also suggest the symphonic DVD with Tom. It's, like I said before, I think it's...
I have deadly sideburns in that video, so just be careful.
All right, well, let's see what else we got going on here. So we've talked a bit about Yes. Okay. Stephen, you got any questions? What do you see in there?
If you're ready to bridge the gap over to Kansas,
yeah, well, we can bop around.
Plenty of questions about the Kansas, I would say.
Right. Yeah,
the first one that was asked was by Tim, and he asked, about the writing process on the new Kansas album, and just anything you can tell us about that.
When I joined the band, they were already in the progress of getting ready to do this album. And Zach Risby, our guitarist and producer, had written, I think he had 6 songs demoed, all music. And there was room for 3 more songs, music-wise, and a whole lot of lyrics. And in my first conversation with Phil Ehart, when he asked me to join the band, I talked to him about songwriting and contributions to the new album. And he was very welcoming of it, which was like, yes, finally one of these bands, which is, well, getting me in on the party. And because I've always been a songwriter. But yet a lot of people in progressive circles might not know that, because my own band Spiraling was more of a power pop thing. And we had some progressive influences, but we weren't really full on prog rock. So, and my own solo album was a little bit more singer-songwriter, atmospheric sort of thing. So to get in, well, actually the precursor to that was with The Sea Within. So they had heard about me from that as well. That had come out just shortly before this conversation started about Kansas. And so the guys were really welcoming, and I was in the process of learning this show, the Point of No Return anniversary tour, 2.5-hour show. And I was getting that ready and programming the sounds. And I knew that as soon as we had that break in the summer, we would be recording in earnest for this new album. So the juggling act began, working on the music, setting up my studio to write and record demos, and also attempt to write some lyrics to some of this music that Zach wrote. So I ended up writing lyrics to 4 of Zach's songs. And there are 3 songs entirely of my own creation, which was very unexpected, that they kind of turned me loose and said, okay, we like this. We'll put this, we'll go there. And so it was just nonstop music activity for the whole year, really. And Zach's demos, he would write the melodies and he would just record them with a guitar line. And so it was a really interesting process, writing lyrics first and then refining them and sculpting them to actually fit into the melodies that were already there. And in some cases, Phil would give me a title and say, The Absence of Presence. Say a couple words about it, what it meant to him, and then away you go for it, start writing. And that's a really interesting process, because lyrics, I think a lot of musicians who come to this world as instrumentalists first, it's something that will come later and oftentimes gets not as much attention in a person's musical life and development. Because when you practice your instrument, you're practicing, but it's like, you practice lyric writing? Yeah, you just have to keep refining. When I first moved to Nashville in 2010, I saw people who were refining and crafting their lyrics the way I had approached my musical life as an instrumentalist. And I wanted to take lyrics seriously as well. They don't come fast for me, but when I do get them down, I want something that's going to stand up and something I'm going to be happy with over time.
Well, I think you come up with some really nice ones for this one. And, Carrie Livgren always had some really poignant lyrics. So, that's setting the bar pretty high, but I think you guys are getting there. And it sounded, what I've heard of the new album is really impressive. I think people are going to love it.
Thank you.
Question, how do you go about arranging a 10-minute epic? Does anybody use like a white dry erase board and call each section a name and all that kind of stuff? Or do you manage to remember all of that?
Good question. When I heard Zach's songs, they were pretty ready-made. His demos were very detailed, and mock-ups of every instrument, of every section. And I would take the same approach with my demos. They weren't as refined. It was a little bit more meat and potatoes. Here's what we got. But by the time the demos were approved, there'd be a few conversations about if we need to refine something, we need to tuck this in here, extend that there. Wasn't a lot of fuss about it. And I think when you're learning it, you take it in chunks, you take it in sections, divide it out. If you try to eat the whole enchilada at once, it's not going to be a good idea. But if you just sort of take it piece by piece in terms of internalizing it and learning it, or in some cases writing it.
Do you ever have times where it's almost like a box of parts and it's like, well, this could go in this order, but then again, it could go in this order. It could go in this order. You ever have it piecemeal it together like that?
Well, you could get paralyzed by options.
Yeah.
If we have so many options. And in my audio software, if I name the sections and give them labels, I can mix and match and try different arrangements, which is cool because you can live with, you can put together a version of your song that does a certain thing. And then you can like listen to it for a few days and feel how it goes. And sometimes you might want to come back to it and say, oh, no, this chorus needs to come in later or needs to repeat, etc. So we're sort of blessed and cursed with tons of options now. But we try to use them to our advantage and not overthink it and box yourself into a corner where you can't decide. Just to see what flows.
I think it's what you have on the album flows really well. And I think you guys have upped the prog ante this time around. I think this album is an obvious follow-up to the Prelude Implicit. But I think it's got a little more prog pizzazz in the mix, I think if anybody liked the epic side of that album, they're going to like this one even more. And there's a couple great ballads on it too, so it isn't all, songs chock full of ideas. It's a mixture, as any great Kansas album is. So I think people.
Well, yeah, that's Kansas, isn't it? You got the prog, you got the hook, melodies, and thoughtful lyrics, and it's a nice pool to swim in when you're writing, and we're not under pressure for some label to have a radio hit, and you can go pressure in the other way too, like this must have 15 million time signature changes or else it's not advanced. What's that?
Either.
Well, yeah. To me, it's like, again, I'm totally quoting Rick Wakeman here, where he says rock and roll to him means no rules. And I take that to heart. I just write first. We ask the questions later. I think the rule is like we dig it. And then there's no checklist of required boxes to fill in. Okay, it's got to have 9/8 time signature click. It's got to have a mellotron click. That stuff. If you write with that kind of list, you end up just sort of retreading, I think.
Yeah.
But if we just write first and say, well, I love a mellotron, or I love the sound of 9/8, it's just let the music decide where it wants to go.
That sounds like
my opinion.
Okay, I got another question here, fan. Frank Bernard was wondering, was the Beacon show recorded by the band?
I think we record everything, but that doesn't mean we can release it. There's a lot of red tape with venues. You can't just at this stage, at this level, the venue has a say at as far as what gets released. But I haven't heard it, but I sure would like to, because that's a good document, especially playing that Leftoverture stuff back to back with Point of Return was.
Well, I was hoping
intense.
there would be a DVD, but I hear that those are really expensive to do nowadays. So it's kind of a lot of group stuff.
A lot of it depends on where you're recording it, because, like I said, different venues have different policies, and say, "Oh, you want to record a video here? Step up with the cash," and some other places are like, please record a video here and show our venue. So it depends. Sorry?
It's like, please let people know. Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, let's see what else we got here.
Well, Sean, I'm going to go back a little bit further in the questions, so we don't skip over some people. It's another one from Frank, actually. But will you guys be playing any more of the deeper cuts that longtime Kansas fans haven't heard in a long time in your upcoming, whenever the shows happen?
Anything's possible. As far as where our shows, with the situation pushing the shows into the future as it is, we have a couple main set lists. We have the Point of No Return anniversary show, which has been pretty consistent. We've swapped out a couple numbers since I've joined the band. There have been a couple changes. of the set list. And then we have like the summer set, which is shorter, more compact, a little bit more of the more pop side of Kansas. And as far as deep cuts go, again, I think anything is possible, because it seems like since I've been in the band, they've had fun sort of looking under some corners and some things that we haven't done, or that the band hasn't done in a long time. Like even in Song for America was like, I wanted to bring that piano break back, and they said, well, send us a video of you playing that and we'll decide. And then we brought it back in. So it's like, apparently they hadn't done that in many, many years. So again, anything's possible.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What are some of your favorite pieces to play now that you've learned a big chunk of the catalog?
Oh man, I mean, Song for America is such an emotional, uplift part of the show. The Wall, again, I like the emotion factor. Songs like The Wall and like Hopelessly Human.
Oh yeah.
They're just, I like the passion stuff. But then some of the romps are really fun too. Like The Spider always keeps us on our toes, and Paradox is really cooking. And we used to do Mysteries and Mayhem, and that was really fun. So yeah, I mean, there's never a part of the show where I'm not having a great time.
That's awesome.
Really cool.
It makes me wonder, how would you describe Carey's compositional style? Have you seen any kind of thread that runs through it all, or does it seem like every album he was kind of in a different headspace?
I think it's melodically driven, and that can mean a lot of things, but you will hear melodies that will appear in one part of the song and then will sort of resurface in other ways. And this is something that Yes was really getting into as well. And you listen to Tales from Topographic Oceans, and there's all these Easter eggs all over the record where you're like, oh yeah, that was the melody from 3 minutes ago. It's hidden in this part,
right.
You know. And Carey has that aspect to him too. And it's the classical development motif. And so I think you have that factor. And what's interesting about a lot of progressive rock bands that didn't come out of the universities or the conservatories or anything, is that there is still this kernel of garage rock band, 3 chords and a dream, let's have a good time. It's in there. And then there's all these lattices and gargoyles and all sorts of other things built all around it, but there's still an immediacy in there, which is really exciting. I think one of the things that makes Kansas has its sound as well.
Awesome. How about Steve Walsh's style? I think he's underrated sometimes. Being in a band with somebody like Carey, you can just imagine.
Yeah, it's great.
That stuff to the table, and he did like stuff like The Spider. I think that's as progressive as anything anyone else has done.
Yes, it's very Emersonian, isn't it?
Very much, yes.
And yeah, and so he really had and has, just a lot of firepower, for lack of a better term. But yeah, The Spider is really just otherworldly and unusual. And a lot of times when keyboardists write these intricate tunes, sometimes they tend to fit the shape of your hand, because you're just moving away. But The Spider is not so pianistic. It really takes your hand, twists them up in so many different ways that it's really interesting to think, where did this come from? How did he come up with these melodies? Because it's certainly not consonant. It's a very dissonant and very out kind of tune, which is cool and a little unusual. But then he's also got some just straight up soulful rock and roll.
Yeah, Lonely Wind, that's a great ballad.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of them.
Absolutely.
Oh, very cool, very cool. I've always kind of wondered about the contrast between their styles, because they all seem to fit so well together on the album. You almost wouldn't guess that one was written by one guy or the other. It just the blend, and especially Point of No Return, the way that first album side flows is just brilliant. That's just the way all the songs kind of segue from one to the next. That's like my favorite album side of the Kansas catalog, I think, just because of the way it flows. You know, there's so much excitement packed into those songs. Like you said, Paradox, you know, that's, you know, it's like 5 minutes long, but it feels like a 10-minute epic, and probably has more in it than some 10-minute epics. So
yeah, they really get down to it in that one.
Really,
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in the studio when they were running that.
You wonder how it all kind of came about originally and what the inspirations were. I can't help but, with the Spider, I imagine, you know, Steve was an Emerson fan as well. I can't help but think that Keith might have been an inspiration for that piece, but I don't know, I wasn't there. Let's see what else we got going on here.
We got a question. Yeah. I want to stick with the Kansas questions before going into current events questions.
All right.
But basically, Andy was asking how much of the new album was recorded with everyone in the studio versus remotely from home or anything of that nature. Was it all done at the studio?
We had the best of both worlds, I think. We met in the studio in Atlanta and cut the core tracks, drums, some guitars, David Ragsdale's violin, some vocals, some organ. You know, we all got down to it in the studio, and Zach is producing too, so he's directing traffic and directing sessions. So we had like a core number of tracks, but it wasn't complete by any sense. And then on the other side, we get the luxury of being able to go to our home studios and cut some more things where I can develop the sounds more, use all my toys and bells and whistles in my own home studio, dig out the analog goodies. And also some, you know, vocals. We did some vocals in Atlanta and we did some at our own places. So I think it gives you the option or the ability to get that immediacy, get that feel of a rock band, but also the soundtrack ability of just a real wide sonic palette. And we use a lot of sounds on the record.
It's a feast for the ears. It really
Hope so.
It's great. And when does the album come out? June what?
June 26th is when The Absence of Presence will be released.
All right. Well, I'm sure Kansas fans have
ominous.
ordered that already, but if not, you can. And
The Absence of Presence will be released. That sounds so
yeah.
I love that.
Go pre-order this record.
Yeah. I had another question about the new album. Actually, Stephen, what you got?
So I've got one that's just more about the current times. What are you doing with all this downtime? This is from Mike.
Yeah, what's your typical day consist of lately, Tom?
I have not been idle once since the pandemic began. You would think, oh man, I'm just going to be sitting around and have all this time, and no, I don't.
You're not alone. I mean, I was talking to Roger Manning a couple of weeks ago, and he said, it's business as usual for me, and I've got more jobs than usual lined up. He just kind of goes down to his little keyboard cave, and it's a typical day. So that's great for you guys. And a lot of people in the studio probably just feels like business as usual, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love Roger Manning. Second of all, when I got to, so what happened was, just to show you the behind the scenes thing here, I actually boarded a plane to Portland, Oregon to begin the West Coast run with Kansas, and got word that the gigs were postponed as I was on the plane.
Oh, wow.
And I managed to get myself off the plane and my luggage off the plane before it took off. And then I came to New Jersey. Now, at the time, I was not living in New Jersey, all the way back in March, right? Still a resident of Nashville. And I only, staying with relatives, and I only had a few instruments here. Casio actually sent me a digital piano to work with right before their offices closed, which was a stroke of luck. And I had one microphone and a computer with audio recording software on it and one synth. And in that very first weekend, we're talking like March, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, I saw what was happening and how everything was starting to take place. And I was like, I have to get to work, like making music right now to sort of set the tone for whatever we're going to be in for. And also as kind of a test to see what I can actually accomplish here. And so I quickly wrote a 1 minute and 30-second punk rock song called Sanitize Your Phone and Remote Control, which was like an idea it's a song for cooped up families to sort of scream along together. And just sort of blow up some steam. And I made a video for it, and computers crashing constantly. I'm like, how am I gonna get anything done here? But I managed to see what the limitations of my setup were. So I was like, all right, well, I was making YouTube videos, but didn't have all that gear either. So I dug into the archive, and I found a spiraling performance at CalProg of doing Sound Chaser by Yes that had never been released before. And I was like, oh, I think I want to show everybody this.
That's hot stuff. You know, while you're on it, tell me, how did you just decide to do the most amazing technical Yes song ever? Or was that just kind of, because I dare say it is.
It is really a monstrous tune. And even the parts that doesn't seem like it, it is really, really quite involved. And I remember our band, again, we were more of a streamlined band, but this Prague festival CalProg, they had us over particularly because of my associations with Yes and Camel. And I said, all right, well, you know what kind of band we are? And they said, yeah, will you open the show? Give us just a jolt, it started in the morning. So in California, we're playing our set of tunes, and as per the tradition of that festival, bands are asked to cover a classic Prague, and I was like, oh, if we're gonna go big or go home. So and I really love the idea of us being a 4-piece band with a 4-piece drum set, a couple of keyboards, and not like Spinal Tap amounts of gear on stage, and just say, all right, we're going to give you Sound Chaser, and we're going to do it right, and have a good day.
It's awe-inspiring.
But it thank you. And we're proud of it, but it dominated our lives for some time, because the way you tackle a tune like that is to play it very slowly and deliberately. And like we said before, we chunk it out into different parts. But we all love geeking out so much that we really each had a good time digging into our respective parts. And I'm quite the Patrick Moraz fan, and so that was really fun to get that going. But man, to sing that stuff at the same time.
Just to stand there and sing it a cappella would have been quite a feat, but do all this at the same time, it's like riding a bicycle and singing 3-part harmony or something,
Well, I had hoped that John Anderson was going to be able to come and see the show. He couldn't make it, but I told him we were coming and that we were going to play Sound Chaser, and he's like, "You're mad. Why? Like, why would you do that to yourself?"
Because we can.
Yeah, and he said, "Oh, I was on helium in those days." That's what
if you all want to check that out, it's on Tom's YouTube page, so go over there and subscribe. And again, my guest tonight is Tom Brislin, keyboardist for Kansas. We're talking about the new Kansas album, The Absence of Presence. And we're also talking about some past things that he's done in the past, like playing with Yes.
Speaking of playing with Yes, we actually have a question that's right up that alley. So our Alan, is it Siller? Yeah. Siller? Was wondering what the most challenging song to learn was for the symphonic tour, when we were talking about earlier.
I was going to say Gates of Delirium, but that was also one of my audition pieces. There we go. Hit it. Let's go. There you go. Get on that upright. Let's go. Let's have it.
I don't think I can. That's not one I could do in the upright. I could probably.
Sure. Oh, come on.
5 seconds of roundabout with the bow or something silly.
Oh, I like it. Yeah. So they said when they wanted me to come on board for the symphonic tour, they said, make a CD. We're going to send you a live CD from our previous tour, and you add keyboards to it, put yourself on the left speaker and put the reference on the right speaker so we can solo you out and hear what you're doing. And I set up whatever gear I had, and I had do 2 songs, Close to the Edge and Gates of Delirium, over 35 minutes of music. And so it was a smart move on their part, because if you go for the jugular and say, because if I could do the most demanding stuff, they would have confidence that I could do all the other things.
Right.
They all present.
It's like he can handle Don't Go if he can play Gates.
Right. Yeah. Don't Go super straight ahead, and but Gates has the most involved musical passages, but there are other songs that are behemoths. Close to the Edge is no Moni. So and even something like Ritual, which didn't have any real too many technical demands on me, but it's like, you got to remember where you are. You could just wander into the forest and not know where you are at any point, because the song is long and there's a lot of parts that repeat themselves. But I think probably the most challenging part in that for me was the percussion break. But it was still pretty intense to do.
It was usually you're lucky to see one of those at a Yes show. To see 3 in one night was just awesome. And then lots of other music too. And You and I, Heart of the Sunrise.
Oh, I wish we played Heart of the Sunrise on Symphony. No, it's my favorite Yes song. And it was one that we didn't do. I lament.
Maybe
we
one
need to
day.
Get together and do it.
Just never know.
Why not? We'll Zoom.
Stars align and make it happen. Hey, Stepping Out. I love that cover that you did, and you kind of did your own thing with it. Took it to the next level, some people would say. How'd that come about?
That was when I lived in Nashville the first time. Spiraling had called it a day. I moved to Nashville to dig into my songwriting and to start write and record my album, which would become Hurry Up and Smell the Roses. There were some bands that were doing these video songs. They call them, one group, Pomplamoose in particular, where they were really experimenting with a lot of overdubbed parts, where they would show you every single track that they recorded. And I was just fascinated by watching all the little, Thomas Crown Affair, Brady Bunch cubes of different musicians, which is funny because that's like super common right now because of lockdown conditions. But I was like, I really wanted to try something like that. So my friend Kira Smith, who had been photographer for Spiraling and for Kansas actually, was looking to cut her teeth on some video editing techniques. And I came with this idea, and I was like, I want to try something and do a cover. I love Joe Jackson, and I've worked with Graham Maybe, Joe's bassist. Worked with him on several gigs in New Jersey, and he was also the bassist for They Might Be Giants when Spiraling was touring in support of them. So I really like his music and Joe's music. So I decided to do the song, but I didn't want to just do a straight up cover, because you could just listen to the original, which is great. I wanted to change it up a little bit and have some fun. I was also listening to some Mark Ronson at the time. I think his production influenced the beats and things like that. But again, a lot of it was like experimentation about seeing what it would be like to try to just create all the tracks myself and film everything. So yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, I shared that with Steven recently, and he's like, "Wow, the video editing alone must have been quite a job."
I was wondering if you had done the editing yourself, because that looked like some tough editing, honestly.
It was involved, but she really nailed it, and like she would show me the roughs of it, and I was really digging the way it was coming together, because again, we wanted to show all of the tracks that you would hear be represented at some point. And even like when the drum machine is going, we showed the screen of the that was playing the drum machine. So we didn't want to leave anything out, but it was involved. It's probably a lot easier now. I mean, people could do something like that on their phone, but even 9 years ago, it was a bit more involved. And I've dabbled with a little bit of video editing, like I do my YouTube videos and Sanitize Your Phone and stuff like that. But sometimes I get too deep in the weeds, and I'm like, I should be playing music. I'm a musician. I should leave it to the experts. But it's fun part of the entire creative process and the tools that we have at our disposal. So I like giving it a go once in a while.
That's a great video. So Kansas fans, if you have yet to see Tom's cover of Joe Jackson Stepping Out, check it out on his Facebook, or excuse me, his YouTube page. Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard your vocals. And of course, instantly when I heard the last song on the new Kansas album, I was like, oh, Tom's singing lead vocals on this. Tell us a bit about that song. It's called the song The River Sang. Is that right?
Yeah. Spoiler alert. I sing lead on a song on the Kansas record.
Yeah, okay. Let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah, the last song on that record. I would sing on the demos of the songs I wrote. Memories Down the Line and Song The River Sang. My other musical contribution to the album is an instrumental, Propulsion 1. And so those two songs had my vocal, the other two songs had the vocal by me. That was a reference for Ronnie to work with. And as is per Kansas tradition, you know, sometimes they have an alternate singer, like Robbie Steinhardt, for instance.
Sure.
So it's not unheard of to hear a different voice, like Billy Greer would sing on Summer on the Prelude Implicit. And this time it was my turn, the new guy. They threw me right in the fire and had me. And so you hear me and Billy singing on that one, actually. Billy's doing a lot of the harmonies in there. So yeah, it was really fun. And again, no rules. They said, let's have fun with this. And we just took the song to so many wild different directions that we had a lot of fun doing it.
That's a really cool tune. I think people are going to like it. Are you doing any background vocals on some of the other songs?
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we my voice is in there, Billy's voice is in there, Zach's voice is in there. I think Ragsdale might have got a couple vocals in there too, but he is working so hard on violin on that record. He is playing so much violin. It's amazing.
He's so amazing. You know, it's
Yeah.
like the John Luke Ponty of Prague. You know, fusion quality chops. So yeah,
he's great.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful tone too. Okay, let's see what else we got going on. So tell us about the Gibraltar stands that you got. Tom has this amazing keyboard stand setup that, you know, you've probably seen some of these drum arrays before where it's like the cage going around the drummer. Back in the 80s, that was pretty popular. Now that's by a company called Gibraltar that makes a lot of hardware for drummers. And I think they made this keyboard stand for you as well. Am I right?
All those parts are from Gibraltar Drum Racks. And they design a few stands, but it's all a la carte parts. And then you watch their YouTube videos and they show you how to put the parts together in different ways to create different keyboard stands. I think now they might be selling it pre-designed, but I literally had to go through a parts list and say, okay, I need to order 5 clamps and 4 elbows and this tube and stuff. And because back in, I think around 1998, when I was fronting Spiraling, I was the band's lead singer. And, you know, you watch a guitarist play, you see them strum, you see the drummer hit the drum, you see the singer sing into a microphone. When you're witnessing a live performance, you can see the musicians playing those instruments. But so many times the keyboardists were stuck behind these black rectangles. Looked like we could be doing anything. And I really wanted to do something about it in performance. And Spiraling, we went to CBGB's once. This is actually a few years before that, and saw a band from Minneapolis called 12 Rods, which had a profound influence on me as a songwriter, and Spiraling was a big influence on us. They were an otherworldly band. Again, they were like a 4-piece band that just grabbed you by the throat, and they were dynamite. And their guitarist, Ev, had a keyboard that he would play sometimes, and he had it at a really severe angle, so he could just strum his guitar, just reach down and grab a chord. And I was like, I can see him playing the keys. What a concept. And I saw these old Farfisa organ catalogs from the 60s where they had the organ was on this tilt. I was like, well, yeah, it should be pointed up at me because my wrist is straight now, like when I'm playing the piano. This this is what I want to do. So I went through years of trying to figure out ways to do this because there wasn't that sort of thing readily available. Keyboards would either play straight on or tilted down to them if they were playing something from a higher angle. But I wanted something that went like that. So I would have the ergonomic advantage, and for being a lead singer, they could see me being a lead singer and playing the keys at the same time. So I would use amplifier stands. There were a couple keyboard stands for a brief period of time that had that sort of angle, and I've tried all sorts of contraptions. But then I realized that this Gibraltar system was so customizable whereas I could actually get it to be exactly to my height and specifications of me personally. So when I just put my arms a certain way, they will just fall right on the key. And I started doing this with my Tom Brislin and Friends Gold Rotation show at Prague Stock in New Jersey back in 2018. And these keyboard stands are not easy to put together, and they're not particularly easy to transport, but boy, they hold the keyboards really solid and they look cool. And I feel great when I play them. So, and I was like, let's have some fun on stage. It just looks sort of pretty neat to my eyes, and that's showbiz.
It looks great from a distance. Am I right that they don't really tear it down? They just kind of take it and lift it and put it in storage? It's not.
Yeah, most of the time you can disassemble it and throw it into a bag, but I wouldn't want to.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to take it apart and put it together every night, but it can be done.
That looks really cool. I think sometimes it's kind of a wonder for a lot of keyboard players. It's like, do you want a bunch of spindly legs sticking out and a bunch of wires, or we're going to cover this up with something, and so.
Well, that's when I went to Renaissance. Yeah, when I went to Renaissance in 2009, it was a different, I had just gotten done with Spiraling, which is a high energy rock thing where I'm right up front, but now it was more of a classical thing. I was the orchestra in Renaissance. That was my job. So I was sitting down and had the cover around the keyboard, the scrim as it were. And we got a little scrim happy and started covering everything up. I think that's what's right behind me now is my old Renaissance scrim.
Well, there you go. So how did you come to work with Annie and crew?
Well, playing with Yes was opening of the Pandora's box of Prague. Okay. It led to Camel, and that was brief but very fun. And then a few years later, took a little detour, did a couple tours with Debbie Harry as her musical director. That was another thing that came about through the Meatloaf sphere. The Meatloaf and Yes and Blondie all had the same management at some point. And then Prague people kept calling the Sin. I did an album with them, and it was around the same time that Annie had heard about me too, through I think Jordan Rudess and Patrick Moraz and Larry Fast, I think, were people who sort of pointed Annie in my direction. And there were a lot of ways that Renaissance reunion could have gone, in terms of the band members and how it all came to be. But yeah, it was really cool to see those old orchestral scores that Lou Clark did on the original record. I was poring over these pencil written orchestral scores that were used on the Live at Carnegie Hall and other classic Renaissance. Yeah, it was a pretty cool deep dive.
So that kind of gave you a shortcut in a way. Would it be fair to say that you don't always have a shortcut when you join a band and have to learn their catalog?
I almost always have to learn everything by ear from the recordings and with no guidance. It's like, here, you figure it out, man.
Yeah, how do you peel an onion like that and consume it and stick it in here? Is there a certain process you go into to kind of learn it?
To learn things by ear?
Yeah, or just to, like something like Close to the Edge. I mean, how did you assimilate all that, I guess?
It's like organize
it happen?
Take it piece by piece, just like they did when they recorded it. Yeah. But I've been learning music by ear as long as I've been playing the piano, and had the benefit of learning the traditional route and piano lessons, but also figuring a lot of stuff out on my own. And
You know, I heard that you had started really young learning music from commercials. Is that right?
Well, anything for attention, right? You know, you got.
What's a commercial you can remember from your childhood that you play right now?
I don't know, Hungry Hungry Hippos or something. I don't know. But I was also, you know, like, oh, the theme from The Greatest American Hero or something. Anything that would get my older siblings or my parents to laugh and, you know, to be amused was so my vainglorious origins of wanting to be a performer. Yeah.
Well, that's very cool. That's very cool. All right, let's see what else we got here.
We got a question from Martin on here. It says, how much of Spiraling was your baby and how much of it was more of a collaborative?
It was all my baby. I wrote all this stuff for Spiraling, and I was really fortunate to work with several musicians over the course of that band's existence who were willing to buy in to what I was throwing down. But as time went on, I would start to write based on their personalities. At first, I was sort of like, I want to create all of the parts and be the puppet master or whatever. That was when I was 19. And then as we developed and got our core group of guys that became the band known as Spiraling, we were originally called You Were Spiraling, which had a lot of jazz rock influences and some progressive influences. And the guys in Spiraling, I knew the way they played, so it was sort of like a circle. I would write to their strengths, and eventually I would just show them the skeleton of the tune, and they would really know what to do, and they were just all dynamite players.
That's awesome. Why did the name change?
Because everybody got it wrong. Like every marquee that listed the band was like, You Are Spiraling, and like, hey, You Were Spiraling. Okay, so do you remember this movie, The Commitment?
I think so.
It was a movie about a bunch of young people from Ireland who form a soul band. And it was a great movie, and they're playing Wilson Pickett and the Procol Harum, all sorts of cool stuff. Right. And they got a young hotshot sax player in the band and an old seasoned trumpet player in the band. And the sax player wants to show off. He starts playing bebop and jazz licks all over the music, and it infuriates the rest of the band. And the trumpet player gets on his case and he says, soul has corners, but you were spiraling. That's jazz. It doesn't belong here. And I was like, oh, that's great. I want to be in a band that blurs the lines and breaks the rules of a genre. I want to have, like I said, I want there to be like, you know, Stevie Wonder's over here, Sting's over here, Magma's over here, King Crimson's here, and I want to be in the middle. And why not? We're 19. Like, what do you have to lose? So it was kind of the story behind that, but it was a mouthful, and we started getting more gigs and more attention, and it was a little bit of an awkward name. And since we did streamline our sound a bit, we also streamlined our name.
Very cool. We had a fan question wondering if you are inspired to go on stage in a pair of shorts that are too small and no shirt and do a handstand anytime soon in honor of Steve Walsh.
If I had a nickel for every time I've missed that. Don't hold your breath, America.
That's right. That's right. Wow.
Then we had another fan question, we'll say, from Trisha that was wondering if you were inspired by your Chihuahua.
I answered that question before it was asked.
By the person.
The answer is yes.
Awesome.
And what's the Chihuahua's name?
Pee-wee.
Pee-wee. Okay, that's appropriate.
The greatest dog in the world.
Very cool. Okay.
Happy birthday, Pee-wee.
And there's one more question from, looks like T. Michael Crawford. Does Tom have any more solo stuff planned? And they're hoping you do.
Well, the question earlier about what I've been doing during this lockdown is, you know, I'm trying to make music. I'm trying to create every day. I'm practicing piano. I'm teaching a lot, actually. And I have a really cool core group of students who are adults, and a lot of them play in bands or are music creators themselves. So it's a really cool way to keep the music on my mind as well when we talk about it and we talk it out and discuss composition and stuff like that. So I am endeavoring to write, but like I said before, I don't ask a lot of questions when I write the music. If I write it and it says, "Oh, this is Kansas material," I'll put this over in the Kansas camp. And then sometimes I'll write something and it would be more of a personal thing that I should probably do with just me and a piano or something like that. I will likely have a lot of music to go through and develop, and we'll see if the situation allows. I will probably do another solo album or something with a really cool group of musicians that I collaborate with.
And speaking of that, tell us a bit about the Sea Within. This is kind of a modern prog supergroup. It's got Marco Miniman on drums. Who else is in the band? I'm trying to remember now.
We have Royna Stolt and Jonas Reingold from the Flower Kings. And Daniel Gildenlow from Pain of Salvation sang on the album, but we had Casey McPherson who joined to sing some of the stuff on the album and had been the band's live singer.
Okay, yeah, from Flying Colors, that band with Morse
and
horses.
Right, yeah. So you have a few other guests on the album. John Anderson appears, Rob Townsend from C. Packett's band, and it's interesting. We talked about CalProg when Spiraling was there. Flower Kings were there as well, and I think they might have played parts of Gates of Delirium. We were all having a big relayer festival over there. I think it was, but I had actually met Royna a few years earlier because Transatlantic had come to see Yes in Germany. So, and we were all hanging out, and Daniel was also touring with them at the time. So I met Royna and Daniel and Pete and Mike and Neil like years before, but it was so brief. It was just a sort of a hello. And I wasn't super familiar with them or what they were up to. And then it was a few years later that Spiraling and Flower Kings played together, first in CalProg, and then we also played together in New Jersey. Spiraling opened for Flower Kings at New Jersey Prog House. So we had sort of a little mutual admiration society and had kept in touch over the years, and with Royna and Jonas particularly. And then I went to Sweden in 2015 to record keyboards for the Anderson Stolt album.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
And that music was all pretty much ready to rock, and I just had to come and execute and put a few twists into it. But that was something that Royna and John had really fleshed out by the time we got there. But we wanted some of that live thing, because I could have recorded a lot of things at home, but why do that when you could fly to Sweden and record in a beautiful studio? And it was actually a really great session and really memorable for me.
That was a really good record.
Yeah, and so it was only a couple of years later that they approached me about this new idea of doing a new band with Marco and Daniel. And so we all started writing for it. I did a little bit of collaboration with the guys and also brought in a song of my own called They Know My Name, which was originally being developed for Hurry Up and Smell the Roses album, but was not finished. And I'm glad it wasn't, because I didn't have any of the subject matter until this time came and the song finally clicked. So we did the session in London in 2017. And there were a lot of different ways we could have gone creatively, and you have a lot of very serious musicians involved, and so Daniel actually ended up bowing out to focus more on Pain of Salvation near the conclusion of our London sessions. But we got the record out and we did our first show at Night of the Prog and Lorelei in 2018, and that's actually where Thomas from Inside Out had thought to recommend me to Kansas. Due to everyone being from so different parts of the world and having so many things going on, Marco has the Aristocrats, and Jonas is now with Steve Hackett, and Royna does more Flower Kings things, and as you said before, Casey's Flying Colors. it's not super easy for us to regroup and get things going. So we have performed thrice, 2 times on the Cruise to the Edge, and prior to that we did the Night of the Prague.
Well, it's a great album, so you should check it out if you haven't. It's called The Sea Within. And also that Invention of Knowledge from Anderson Stolt. That's another great one. That was kind of like the reemergence of John Anderson with a full band, after he kind of wandered around in the wilderness for a few years after splitting with Yes. He was doing a lot of little solo shows where he just kind of strummed on the E chord and force a melody over the top of it that probably sounded familiar. And it was nice to hear him kind of settle down with an electric band, kind of like Yes once again, and play some really adventurous long pieces of music. And he still sounds amazing. I mean, he just defies time,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable, John.
Did you?
So good.
Did you get a chance to see the ARW tour with Wakeman and Raven?
Yes, I believe I saw two of the concerts. I always try to catch any of the guys when they're in town.
Yeah, it was kind of neat to have 2 Yeses going around at the same time, and it was nice to see John sing those songs, hopefully not for the last time, but, for the first time in quite a while, with a full band. So that was really.
He sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, he's like 70, 75? I don't know if he's quite that old, but he's timeless. It doesn't really matter.
Totally.
And, the other version of Yes, have you seen them as well?
Yes, I have. Well, we did the Cruise to the Edge, so I got to hang with those guys as well. And then I also did, I was part of the 50 True Summers celebration in Philadelphia in 2018 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the band. They had one of the festivals in the UK, and this was the US one, where it was sort of like a Comic-Con for Yes during the day, and then the Yes concert at night. But I played a solo set there. Patrick Moraz did a solo set there. The guys from Yes did a Q&A. Trevor Horn was there, Tony Kaye, and Roger Dean. And it was a really cool celebration of Yes music. And at the end of the show, they had us all come up on stage for Starship Trooper, which was really cool. And they had me up there with me and Patrick swinging tambourines around like it was pretty funny. But yeah, a really cool experience. And the fan base, the Yes fans have just been really great to me and tremendously supportive, and have jumped on the Kansas train and are supporting me there as well. So I think that's a really cool thing to be part of.
I think that works both ways too. I think a lot of Kansas fans are getting to know the rest of your career now and all the excellence that comes with it. So that's great. Well, got any more before we let Tom go, Stephen?
I think we hit everything in the Facebook. If we missed your question, I'm sorry, because I scrolled through everything and it disappeared. But I think that's it for everybody. If anybody has any final thoughts?
Oh, wait, before you go, we always talk about our earliest musical memories. Are there any records around the house that you just love, or you can even go buy your own?
I know that I had heard a lot of music in the house before it really stuck to me, but I think that first Foreigner record that my sister had was something that I recall really just checking out the experience of putting a record on the platter, putting it down, and sort of seeing what little I could read at the time, that there was a team of people each having a role, and that's what a band was. And I loved it. A few years later, with my own money, I bought Men at Work, Business as Usual. So there was this, like, the 70s rock was the stuff that my siblings had that I discovered. But the first music that I personally went direct to was the 80s. It was the new wave. It was the 80s pop and rock. And that, so those things, those two worlds have always been a big part of me as a musician.
What was the first concert you went to?
Technically, I believe I saw Chubby Checker.
Twisted, huh?
At a, probably when I was like 2 or 3 years old, with a family at a local park summer concert series or something. All I remember is that they put a towel on him, like they used to put the cape on James Brown
right
at the end of the show and walk them off stage. They did that. And then a few years later, I saw a local band called Candy that my brother was working for, and I saw some of those Monkees reunion tours, like a lot of them actually. And but then once I was able to start going to concerts on my own or with my friends, it was Rush and a lot of jazz too. I used to go see Lionel Hampton. He would play at the local park summer jazz series. Saw Chuck Mangione and Chick Corea and the Count Basie band long after Count Basie was gone. But I just, any kind of live music, local battles of the bands, I would be there.
Very cool. All righty. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming by tonight. We'd love
My
to
pleasure.
catch up with you again down the road, and we'll be spreading the word about this. I'll upload this to my special YouTube page for these shows. It's Soul Night Live, SOAL-NIGHT Live, and it's an archive, so you'll be able to watch Tom's interview anytime you like.
One more time, when's that album coming out?
Yes.
Kansas, The Absence of Presence is coming out June 26th, and we got 2 singles out now, Throwing Mountains and Memories Down the Line. They're both on YouTube and Spotify and all the major streaming services. And yeah, thanks for having me on, and thanks to your viewers, listeners, and also your readers for the love they've shown me over the years, and I appreciate that, and hope that you all kind of come with me on this whole Kansas journey. It's been pretty wild so far.
Oh, you betcha. Wouldn't miss that for the world. Awesome.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you all. Tune in next week. My guest is Chris Isaac, guitarist Virgil Yadovitz, who's also worked with a number of people like Stevie Nicks, who you've probably heard of before. So tune in. Same time, same bat channel, or same soul channel, I guess I should say. Thank you, Tom. Take care. I guess we will wrap it up. And thank you, Stephen, for all the help and inspiration. All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care. Thank you all for coming by.